Hi, it's Zoe, and today we're doing a deep dive on composure, how to keep your head when everything is going to hell in a handbasket. Let's do this thing.
Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, your source of strategies and insights to make you a better leader. Influence, improve, inspire.
Greetings from Gathaga. This is my lodge in the mountains where I've been a member for the last 10 years, and it's mine and Rob's fun place to go in the winter. We go skiing, and who knew that there was snow in Australia? I didn't. And I'm delighted that there is. And up here in the snowy mountains, that's literally what they're called, the snowy mountains, we get to play. And this month in August, we are doing a work-life experiment, meaning that we're going to ski in the morning and work in the afternoon. So we're combining work and play. And it allows us to have more time on the slopes. How good is that? And it's an interesting trend. I've seen a lot of my friends and colleagues undertake these work-life experiments. My friends Ben and Liz are actually on a 14-week caravan expedition with their two kids, they started in Canberra and they've gone up to the to Queensland, Northern Territory, and over to WA, which, if you're not familiar with Australian country, is huge. It's like going from east to west coast at the top end, which is hot, damn hot. So they're experimenting with work and life as well. And it's the liberation that technology has afforded us. It allows us all sorts of different quests. And apropos of quests, we're going to be talking about some of that. I was just interviewed today by a gentleman on my first book, Composure. And I'll be sharing that interview when he's got it up and ready in a few weeks. But in the meantime, I thought, what a great opportunity to review some of the key concepts in my first book, Composure. I was just flicking through and reading through what I'd written 3 years ago. And I'm like, damn, this is good. Sometimes you forget that you're capable of doing all these things. In any case, there's some useful things in Composure I wanted to share with you. And it starts with dragons. Now, I have a thing for dragons, a little bit of a interest, obsession, fascination probably is the best word. And they show up in all sorts of different cultures. And for me, in the book Composure, dragons are our fears, our emotions that we don't like, that we try and repress, that we run away from, that we label as bad. And these negative emotions, these pathologies, are actually more useful to us than we would think. And so Composure is about looking into these emotions, into these dragons' faces, and seeing what they have to offer and see how they can serve us as opposed to slay us. And I think that's the great starting point, is we tend to label emotions good or bad, and we try and hang on to the good ones and stay away from the bad ones. But really, every emotion has something to teach us, and every emotion serves a purpose. One of the emotions I've been working with my coach, Jason, who I often refer to as my spiritual dude, we've been working on the emotion of judgment. And in one of our recent sessions, I sat with him. I said, look, Jace, I'm experiencing judgment, and I don't like it. I don't like feeling this way. I don't like seeing someone do something and casting a judgment over them. It just felt bad. So we explored this emotion. And in the exploration of it, the first thing with this kind of emotion is not to make it bad. It's like, just accept that it's there, to honor it. And so I honored judgment, and I honored that judgment has served a place in my world. Though I was like, intellectually, how does that even work? Judgment does not help. This is what I discovered. When we dive into judgment, or when I dove into my own judgment, I found that I used it to mask my own inner vulnerabilities, my own fears, my own self-criticism, if you like. And by making it about other people, it allowed to mask the pain I had about judging myself. And so in judging others, I made myself feel better. So judgment actually made me feel better. And that was its usefulness. So in seeing how this twisted sense of usefulness was working for me, I was allowed to just let it go. I actually could look at the underlying emotion, which is not feeling good enough and not feeling like I was worthy, and go, you know what? That's not true. And I'm good with that. I am worthy. I am a useful human being. I have something to contribute. And when I got to that point and I made it okay to feel judgment, it no longer became part of my world. So judgment in terms of making others look and feel bad to make me feel better doesn't exist in my world anymore. Judgment is used as discernment. And I think that's a nice distinction. So I can use discernment to identify what's good for me and what's bad for me, as opposed to what's good and bad about other people. So when we look at our emotions, when we stare down our dragons, we actually become more empowered. We learn to learn about ourselves in a more proactive, useful way. So how can you do this? Look at your own emotions when they come up. Use your journal and just document them. Today Frank said this to me. I felt angry, frustrated, whatever it is. And just sit with that and notice what was underneath that. What's that about? Where does that come from? And just allow it, honor it. And then when you get to the truth of the matter, when that sort of you get that sinking feeling, which is usually about self-deprecation of some sort, you've hit the right mark, and you're like, wow, that's an old hurt. It's an old pattern. That's all it is. I don't have to run that pattern anymore. And gently you can reintroduce it. You can introduce a new pattern. It's like, I don't need to be judgmental, because really I'm just judging myself. In fact, I'm honoring myself, and in honoring myself, I'm honoring others. So doing some journal exercises around this will be really helpful and useful to you. All right, so dragons are the starting point of composure. In order to develop ourselves and move to a place where we are centered, which is the tagline of Composure, how centered leaders make the biggest impact, being centered is the balance between being and doing. And in the middle is the thinking part. And so when we learn to think effectively, think deeply, think cohesively, it allows us also to hone our quality of energy, which is the being piece, and the effectiveness of our action, the execution part of the whole equation. That is the aspect of composure, so that you can be present to everything that's going on without reacting to it. You can respond instead. One way to develop the capacity to do that, because it ain't easy. I mean, I started off my professional world being an emotional roller coaster. I got some feedback to that effect from one of my first bosses from summer camp. He wrote me his end of season evaluation. So instead of telling me about it, he sent me a letter, which is a terrible form of feedback. He wrote about the fact that I was good at X, Y, and Z, and I was probably a little emotional. And I got the letter and I read that and I went, what? Emotional? What's he talking about? And it was that sort of, oh, there it is. I'm reactive. I get on a tirade. I get attached to things. And it was kind of like my first real huge moment of self-awareness in my professional world. And from there, it started a quest to learn how to become more composed, more stoic, less reactive. And it was tested in all sorts of different ways. I learned that I was a roller coaster of emotions when I worked at Outward Bound, too. I took everything so seriously. Everything mattered, and it was exhausting. So in order to work my way out of this roller coaster of emotions, I started to learn about emotions. It was one of my early quests, if you like. Now, quests are an important part of composure. It's the opportunity to learn and grow, and we can have all sorts of different quests. Internal ones, where like the emotional self-awareness piece, or external ones, where we go and we want to serve others or serve the world in some way. And in Composure, I talk about let's work on your purpose, what is most important to you, your values, and what you hold dear. And the starting point for that is figuring out what irks you the most in the world today. What is the biggest problem in the world? And generally, I find the biggest problems that people tend to focus around are around people, place, and planet. Largely, people's objectives and the way that they serve the world are in one of those three areas: people, planet, and place. A great example of someone who's gone on a great quest in order to serve her purpose is Bianca Jerd, who is my business manager, and she's also one of my senior coaches here at Inner Compass. And a couple of years ago, her and her partner went on a no waste project, which means they wanted to live for a year not producing any waste. Extraordinary, right? So they taped up their rubbish bin and they determined they were not going to put any rubbish in that bin. So it was all about buying things smartly, repurposing, reusing, and recycling where they could. And at the end of a year, they had one tiny bag of stuff they just couldn't find a use for or any way to recycle. And they documented it all on their blog. And in that quest to do something extraordinary, they were hoping to educate others and to do their part in creating a wonderful, happy, healthy planet. it's a great quest, right? It's like, it's challenge. You got to learn something through it. You don't know if you can do it. You don't know what you're going to discover. So off they set. Now, quests can also turn into crucibles. Crucibles are when your quest goes pear-shaped. Well, it doesn't always have to go pear-shaped, but it's when it gets really, really hard. And some crucibles are not of our own choosing. Like when I got cancer, that was not a quest of my own choosing. It was thrust upon me. And here I was in the crucible. A crucible, by the way, is a container, I don't know how to describe it, they use it in metallurgy to melt metals. And it is heated up to huge amount of temperatures, and the vessel itself remains stable, but the contents are transformed forever. So crucibles are like that. They're experiences where they hold the essence of you stable, but inside something has changed and you are transformed. So cancer was a crucible for me. I was forever changed after that. And in that, it was heated to high I was heated to high temperatures and challenged in ways I hadn't realized. And on the other side of cancer, I discovered a new me, somebody who was far more centered, somebody who was far more appreciative of life, and somebody who had to look after her health in a far more deliberate way than I had previously. So sometimes we can choose our own crucibles. And I want to tell you about Laura Marshall. She's a friend of mine I used to work with at Outward Bound, and I ran into her literally on a run a couple of weeks ago. And she's doing a triathlon, an epic triathlon. It's called the Arch to Arc. And this starts off in London and goes to Paris and has 3 legs. The first leg is you just run a casual 140 kilometers from London to Dover. Yep, that's like 3.5 marathons. And then the next leg is to swim the English Channel, which is 33 kilometers swim. And then once you get onto the French coast, you then cycle to Paris, which is, just a casual 292 kilometers. Yeah, it's massive. So I ran into her on one of her training runs, which was a casual, everything's casual today. It was a short and sweet 6-hour run. So she was off doing a 6-hour run. I was doing an hour and a half run. Seemed like long enough to me. Followed by, she was then going to take a couple hours to rest and then do a 2-hour swim in the pool. Yeah, just your usual Saturday afternoon. So she was telling me about her training. She's been training for a year, and you just have to do huge volume training to get your body used to that kind of demands. The actual race is in September. I hope she goes really, really well. So this is a crucible that she's chosen for herself. It's a crucible because it's hard. It's damn hard. The persistence and consistency you need in such long, arduous, epic physical episodes is remarkable. To run a marathon is hard. To run 3.5 in a row as one leg of a journey is incredible. And you really do need a lot of mental focus and a lot of physical resilience to do that. It's a test. And Mark Devine, who runs SEAL Fit, he's an ex-Navy SEAL, he talks about this in many of his books. He's called the 20X factor. And he goes, we are actually capable of 20 times more than we think we are. And just when you think you can't do it, you just push yourself and you can. He said human beings can endure all sorts of crap. And that's what they do in SEAL Fit and in SEAL training in general. They push you beyond what you think is possible to show you that you can. And you need that kind of inner resilience, that inner knowing when you go into some of the most challenging of circumstances in war. So not everybody chooses to go to war. Not everybody chooses to do crazy physical feats. And yet we can choose our own crucible. We can pick a challenge that pushes us. And in doing so, we learn how to harness our thoughts, harness our feelings. And that is the juggernaut of composure. When we harness our thoughts and harness our feelings, they serve us instead of them driving us. And in doing so, we can handle all sorts of stuff. It doesn't mean that we don't have feelings. They still occur. But we are able to observe them and breathe through them and calm them down. So I have 3 major tips when it comes to composure. One is breath work, and it comes up in every discipline, every physical discipline, from martial arts to yoga to warrior training. When you control your breath, you control your natural physical response to stress. So deep abdominal breathing is sort of the hack into composure and calmness. So all you need to do with that is remember to focus on your breath, breathe deeply through your abdomen and let it go. And that will activate your sympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest system, and it will bring your heart rate down. And in doing so, you'll become more focused, more calm, more centered. That's the first tip. Second tip is your inner narrative. It's pay attention to the thoughts that you are allowing to circulate in your brain. This is an amazing thing. We're always got this chatter going on, this monkey mind in our brain. And the stuff that we say to ourselves is horrendous. We wouldn't say this out loud to anybody else. We call ourselves all sorts of different names. We chastise ourselves for small faults. We tell ourselves that we're not good enough. It's ridiculous, this inner voice. So when we start to pay attention to that and we get more deliberate in the thoughts that we allow to populate our consciousness, we can control our focus. I notice this when I'm doing physical activity, actually. When I'm running and I have a negative thought come in like, oh, this sucks. What I notice is I find myself slowing down or stopping or tripping. If I get wound up about an issue, that's often where I lose focus and I'll stumble and fall. And it's always a sign that my inner narrative is not quite right. So it has real physical consequences, not just in your self-management, but in how you show up, how you interact, how you engage with others. So paying attention to what you're telling yourself is the second most important aspect of composure. And the third tip is about practicing compassion. Compassion is the best of love. And when we practice compassion, it's about letting go of judgment and seeing somebody do something that you might be prone to judge and go, wow, they're a human being just like me. I don't know what's going on for them. I don't know what led them to this point, but just like me, I could be in that place where I lose my cool, or I do something stupid, or I do something even horrendous to somebody else. Something has happened in their world that has led them to this point where they are not at their best. And in that moment, you can have compassion for them. It doesn't mean that you condone any of the behaviors. It means that you see them as a human being, and then you can deal with the behavior that's not that productive. So as a leader, if you come from a place of compassion, it allows you to have a place of wisdom to respond with as well. So that prevents you from being reactive and allows you to be responsive. So you press pause, find a place of compassion, and then take action. It's actually harder than you think to do that. Like try and have compassion for a politician that you find abhorrent. It's pretty difficult because, especially with politicians, we're so used to demonizing them and dehumanizing them that we call them all sorts of different names. We make fun of what they wear. We make fun of their accents. We belittle them. Why? Because they're public figures, and public figures, for some reason, we dehumanize. We don't allow them to have full lives. We expect them to be, well, much better than they are, much more human than they are. And so when we find compassion for the people that we loathe the most, and perhaps people that we have reason to loathe because they've done us injury, then we start to master the better part of ourselves, and we can show up and be centered leaders, making a huge impact in the world. That's it from me today. I hope you enjoyed this little insight from Composure, my first book, which was published in 2015. In the meantime, lead well, live well.